My name is Steve Westgarth, and this is The Engineering Leader. Today on The Engineering Leader, I'm delighted to be joined by Amar Mehan. Amar is Lead Technologist at Boots, where he focuses on leading the solutions architecture, tech design, and governance for business solutions being developed across customer platforms, including Boots.com and the Boots mobile app. Amar, thank you so much for joining me on The Engineering Leader today.
Thank you for having me, Steve.
You're very welcome. And I think it's probably fair to say, we know each other quite well. Me and Amar have known each other probably for about 3.5 years now. We
Yeah.
worked together very closely at Boots when I was head of engineering. And when I joined Amar, I was a solution architect and has carried on in the organisation and done great things. So I think we've got a lot of really great shared experience that I'm really looking forward to digging into over the course of the podcast today. And I mean, I guess the starting point really is to talk about digital transformation. Boots has been on a huge journey over the last few years as they've really kind of embraced digital technology and looked at how you can transform a retail organisation. So Amar, tell me what you think digital transformation looks and feels like at Boots.
I think it's digital transformation such an interesting term actually, because I think when I first heard it a few years ago, I thought, well, okay, we've got a website at Boots, and surely that's digital. That I worked in the digital team back then, but there's so much more to it than that, and I think it's about enabling experiences for our customers and colleagues, and ensuring that we are making things easier for them both, and so I think at Boots, it's been really exciting, our digital transformation. I think that we've seen different things from different areas of the organization as well. So I'd say that the way that we've transformed pharmacy, for example, over the last few years, and introduced some really powerful repeat prescription journeys and online clinics journeys, and the way that we've adapted to deliver those journeys has been quite remarkable. But then through COVID as well, just seeing that good work put to test really, because uh, luckily we had built a new repeat prescriptions platform just before the pandemic hit us, and so I think that gave us a really good um, offering to our customers through the pandemic. So the pandemic's definitely helped accelerate that digital transformation in areas as well, and not just pharmacy, in retail as well.
I guess the thing that I really noticed at Boots was the emphasis that was placed upon Omnichannel, and this idea
Yeah.
that actually, yes, we already had a website, but customers actually wanted to engage with the organisation in ever increasing ways. So rather than just coming via the web, they wanted to come via mobile. Well, then everybody had a mobile app, but then we started talking around people wanting to come in via chat, and we put a chatbot onto the website. Or maybe people want to come in via an Amazon Alexa skill, or via some sort of voice prompt. There's all sorts of different ways that the consumers can engage with the organisation, and actually that presents some really unique challenges from a technology standpoint.
It does, definitely, and I think with Omnichannel at Boots, I don't just see it as the touch points that our customers are actually um, using, but also the different services that we have, because we do have retail services and pharmacy, sort of the prescriptions and the services that the clinics that I mentioned, and various things like that. So we've sort of got this. We need to somehow ensure that we're delivering a journey to customers whereby they're not just able to uh, drop off and pick off from a tablet to their mobile device to their laptop or to their in-store journey, but it's also ensuring that some of those different verticals that we're serving a, a s- um, have a consistent experience for customers as well. And that's a real struggle for us, because from a technology standpoint, a lot of these different a lot of those verticals are dependent on different technical platforms, and so to stitching that all together is a very difficult thing to do.
And I think consumers more and more transition seamlessly between channels, don't they? So you might, for example, be on Facebook on your laptop on a morning and you might see an advert, but then maybe on your commute to work, assuming you are going to the office in a post-COVID world, you might come across something on your mobile phone which reminds you of something you've seen earlier, and then actually you might call into your local Boots store to see a product. You're in your lunch break, and you might actually buy it at that point. You might actually complete that journey back on your computer when you get home, and that idea of not necessarily buying immediately or kind of going out with a mission just to buy a product means Boots needs to be at the point that a customer wants to engage with it when the customer is ready to engage. And that idea of really kind of personalizing that journey as well is something that I think while I was working at Boots was incredibly powerful, and something that the organisation was really keen to do. And I guess you've been right at the centre of that, in your role as lead technologist.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to personalization, I think that understanding who the customer is, whichever channel they're using, is a really key bit of information. And I think identity is at the heart of that as well. So, um, and with identity, it's sometimes difficult to know 100% who that customer is, because when you walk into a store, we don't ask you for your username and password. We don't, or two-factor authentication or anything like that. We just we need to use other means to sort of understand that you, the individual in the store, are the same person who's actually got that shampoo or that toothpaste in your shopping basket. So it's, yeah, I think that within my current role, understanding how we can draw some of these journeys together and how we can take these disparate systems and try and make them all well, provide one consistent experience to customers. It is quite a key part of the role, but I would say that identity is one of the foundations of that.
And I guess one of the challenges is that because Boots has come from it's been it's had a website for a great number of years. It's been trading in an e-commerce capacity for a long time. It's got a lot of legacy architecture, and I guess that there used to be a big monolithic application that kind of powered all of those e-commerce journeys. And you mentioned lots of disparate systems, and I guess over the last certainly 3 or 4 years, Boots has moved much more towards a composable commerce solution. Why do you think that's kind of come about? What's been important about developing that composable commerce, your way of thinking about things?
I think there's a few things. I think you mentioned Omnichannel earlier. I think that that's definitely a key part of it, because similar to a lot of other enterprises, um, back in the sort of 90s and noughties, when there was a bit of a boom in .com, Boots did the same thing as many other companies, and they went and found an off-the-shelf commerce platform that they adopted. And yet, because we're an organization that are over 170 years old, we have got quite a mature IT landscape, and so there were many other systems that we had within our enterprise, and we found that, well, we still find today that um, there are things that we do for in store that are built on foundations that were laid many years ago, that work very differently to how they operate online. So to what we're trying to do right now is break down that monolith of the online e-commerce platform that we've got, and we are on in the middle of quite a an exciting journey, really, to break down that monolith and try and establish some new enterprise services, and that's for things like product information management, inventory management, looking at the payment systems that we have, just right across the board. We're trying to identify those different enterprise services that we need that can serve not only our digital journeys, but our in-store journeys, our bricks and mortar journeys as well, because we are very much so an organization that is there to serve the community, and we need to be accessible not just on on one particular channel, which may be the website, but also in store through our customer support center and through chatbots and things like that as well. So I'd say that breaking down that monolithic is a really key part of enabling those customer experiences. But I also think that um, by having a monolith, it limits you with the speed that you can deliver change at as well. I think that it doesn't just affect the experiences that you can deliver, but also the way that you deliver them and the speed that you deliver them at. Because if you've got a monolithic system, then making any minor change to that monolithic system uh, could mean that you have to do a release. And within our organization, because we've got a different change freeze period for digital retail versus some of the flu clinics that we've got versus some of the opticians journeys that we've got, it if we're not breaking down our monolith, it means that we're not able to deliver at the speed that we need to enable those different parts of the business to grow. So I'd say that that's a big factor in the monolith that we have. But also, I'd say scalability as well, because through the pandemic, I think that with a monolithic application, if we were if we only had that to deal with, I think that yes, you could throw more tin at a monolithic application and scale it that way. But ultimately, by breaking a monolith down into smaller chunks, you are able to scale up those different elements of your architecture as and when you need, and that is much more cost effective. That is.
I think there's so much in what you've just said, and I think we should break some of that down actually. So I think that the first thing is around I guess the limitations of the monolith, and I think that one of the advantages that certainly I've observed by going down a composable commerce solution is that within a monolith you're tied to what that monolith provides you. So we all know we need a product information management system. We all know we need a payment system. We all know we need an order management system. But you're dependent upon one vendor or one supplier or one system providing all of those individual components. And the reality is, some of those things the vendor might be great at and might be best of breed, and some of those things maybe not so much. And actually, there might be other products on the market that might deliver some of those things better. And one of the things for me in a composable commerce solution is you're able to actually pick and choose which product is best for us, and look at each individual portion of your estate in isolation, and say, well, actually, for product information management, what's going to be the best solution, what's going to deliver the best value for our business and for our customers. If we want to look at order management, we can look at that in isolation as well, and then look at how those things can be stitched together. It does, of course, introduce complexity, but I think that certainly for me that's one of the advantages. The other thing you touched on was the ability to scale, and I think that that really has come about because of the benefits of moving to the cloud. And you're right, you can absolutely throw tin at an application, and you can put more servers in, or whatever it might be in order to increase capacity. But actually, the ability to auto scale in the cloud really for me is a game changer. I don't know what you think to that, but I mean certainly from my perspective, it's been huge for not just organisations like Boots, but for many other organisations too.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think the ability to auto scale is massive, but also I think it's the um, to do that at a more granular level. I think that that's even more powerful because if you're say for example, if you were running a monolith and you had I don't know, search lister page that wasn't performing very well, or perhaps you'd sent a mail shot out and you're getting thrown with a significant amount of demand just for what that one page, then scaling up a monolith usually means that you're having to scale up multiple layers, but ultimately you are constrained by your database layer quite often with that as well. Whereas if you've managed to break down that monolith and you've managed to take um, the elements that need to serve up that search lister page, then you can just scale up those services that you need for that particular page. And like you say, with auto scaling on the cloud, you can achieve that much more well, without as much downtime and without having to manually react to things and just keep without needing to forecast as well. So I think it is really powerful stuff that we've got at our fingertips now.
And you touched on earlier a little bit about release management, and one of the things that the ways that Boots operates, is I guess quite a traditional waterfall process, especially for release. Because we've always been so risk averse, particularly around peak, and peak trading, around making sure that the website stays performant, stays stable. So we only do a small number of releases. And I think one of the game changers that Boots really started to experience as we moved towards a microservices stack was that actually you could de-risk by doing more releases, and that really is quite a game changer for the organisation as we start to adopt more of a CI/CD mindset. But it's very difficult for an organisation like Boots, as you say, 170 years of history, to really keep pace and move into the modern way of developing things. How do you think Boots have really embraced that and kind of moved with the times? Or do you still think it's going to continue to be a challenge for the organisation?
I think it's an area that we are still looking at improving. To be completely frank with you, I think that w- when I first started at Boots, we had a once or twice yearly release for our website and a once yearly release for our mobile app, and that's just that's unheard of, really. In our well, I don't think it's unheard of. I think that there are other organisations out there that do that. But a few years ago, around the time that you joined, actually, Boots, Steve, we went to a monthly release for the website, and that was quite a significant change. That was. Uh, right now, there are elements of our website that are still on a monthly release cadence, and there are other parts of the website that are on fortnightly release cadence. We still aren't pure CI/CD, so we can't sort of check in a bit of code and just see that appear in production a few minutes later. I think that although we are working on that, that is something that we absolutely want to achieve. So um, so we will. There are things that we need to change to enable that. I think that some of that is to do with the business processes that we have with regards to getting code into production, because um, Boots.com website is worth a lot of money to us, and any minor change that we make to it, we need to be super confident that it's going to land in production successfully. So there is quite a big operation around ensuring that we've got the right performance, the right security, and the right business outcomes for that particular release. So that's why we're on that 2 weekly cadence at the moment. But there are other areas of the site that we are trying to 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 experiment with and to deliver much more of a true CI/CD pipeline into, because we've got the technology there, we've got the right pipelines and the right processes with that respect. But I think that we just need to do that in a manner in which we can prove to our stakeholders within within our business teams that we can confidently release this code and still transact at the kind of volumes that we need to.
And I guess for Boots in particular, that is the challenge, because there are very few organisations that have to face the volume of transactions and the volume of visitors that Boots has to face into, because we really are talking about millions of customers on a daily basis coming to Boots.com to shop. And I'm not saying the scale's unheard of. You've obviously got some very big websites out there, but it is bigger than most online retailers, certainly in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's not just scale; it's also the brand and the reputation, the experience that customers expect when they come to Boots. It's a brand that you probably recognise from childhood if you've grown up in the UK, because everyone's got a Boots on the high street that that they live near. So I think that it's ensuring that we remain a trusted name, and so it's when customers come to our website, we want to ensure that they feel secure and they know that they're dealing with boots really. So and a lot of that is to do with and so to a lot of the work that we do, we need to ensure that we're not going to harm that in any way as well.
So I think we could literally spend all night talking about the Boots organisation and kind of what happens in Boots and how you work and how you operate. And I do have a particular soft spot in my heart for Boots, having worked there for a number of years. But I want to expand the conversation out a little bit and talk more about your role and how you work within the organisation. So I introduced you as lead technologist, and I guess that's a role you've kind of progressed into, having come very much from a solution architect background. Um, but in today's world, even the term solution architect has very, very many different definitions depending on who you talk to or which organisation you talk to. So what do you think is the role of a solution architect?
It's a good question, Steve. I think that you'd get a different definition from everyone, wouldn't you? I think my definition is a problem solver. A solution architect is a problem solver. You take a business objective to that solution architect, and they are responsible for finding that answer. And and I think that when it comes to finding that answer, the way that they find that answer is through decisioning. So they have to do key design decisions. I think that they have to create artifacts that articulate their solution to many different stakeholders, and they could be stakeholders who represent customers within product teams. They could be um, actual people who are implementing a solution or doing the quality assurance around a solution. So I think that there's many people who will consume that solution. I also think it's really important for a solution architect to be able to translate as well, because I think if you have a look at the classic sort of solution architect role from many years ago, they very much so did sit between business teams and IT teams, and I think we are in a very different world now where that is merging together quite rightly, but they would play this quite pivotal role in the middle where they would translate these business requirements into more of a technical speak that the team could go and implement, and vice versa as well. So if there were any concepts that needed to be described to non-technical stakeholders, they could do that as well. So I think to me that's the role of a solution architect. It's a problem solver who is able to pragmatically work through decisions and find the best solution, the right solution for that particular objective that they're looking at.
And how does what you've described differ from enterprise architecture, which some listeners may have also come across?
To me, enterprise architecture isn't tied to a specific initiative that's within the approved budget, whereas enterprise architects are looking at the business strategy, and they're trying to understand what are the aims of the organization within the next 5 to 7 years, or even longer than that, and excuse me, and trying to build out a roadmap of what kind of capabilities are and improvements are required to meet that business strategy. Um, so so they quite often won't be working on approved budget lines. They're they're quite often trying to identify what the future um, the 3 year plan looks like, and what kind of budget needs to be pitched for in that next cycle for solution architects to then work on. So I think enterprise architects are quite often working at a very high level of detail and more abstract than a solution architect who's going to be working with at more of a tangible level of detail. So an enterprise architect will be looking at the different capabilities that that organization needs. Whereas the solution architect will say, well, okay, now we know what the capability needs to be. Here's the actual application changes and infrastructure changes, technology changes that we need to make to meet that objective.
And I think that idea of capability is actually really important because I think that something I've observed in a number of organisations is when you focus on your individual business requirements or individual asks, it's very easy to drive siloed thinking, where you might spin up a project to achieve a particular business aim and another project to spin up a different business aim, but actually they share the same underlying foundational capability. So that might be something like content management, for example, or identity, which was something you touched on earlier on. It would be very easy to say, well, I need identity, you need identity, and end up implementing two different identity providers. Whereas one of the things that enterprise architecture does and should do when it works effectively is bring those ideas together so that we only develop that capability once and we reuse it across the whole of the
Yeah,
enterprise.
yeah, completely agree. And even with the enterprise architecture function that we have at Boots, I think that there are definitely still examples where we do see that duplication a little later than we should. But definitely, I think that having that function there saves that duplication and discourages that siloed thinking, definitely, because when you need to get approval from enterprise architecture for the solutions that you're designing, then it makes you think a bit more laterally, really. It makes you think that, well, okay, knowing that I need to present my solution to a wider audience who aren't necessarily working in the detail that I am, I need to be a bit more aware of what they're also working on and what the different strategies are within the organization, so that when I come to present my solution, it's the right answer that I'm proposing.
And I guess one of the challenges there is you mentioned getting approval from enterprise architecture. And in any large corporate organisation, your approval processes take time and can feasibly slow things down. Which, as we move towards an agile way of working, an agile way of thinking, your organisation's needing to iterate much quicker, much faster, in order to meet customer demand in a really competitive world. Those approval processes become a real burden and a real challenge for the organisation. How has Boots grappled with that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, that is, Steve, because I think that one of those principles within the Agile Manifesto is to make teams self-organized, and in my mind that's empowering those teams to be able to make decisions. But I think that if you're in an organization where there is a strong governance structure and there is a hierarchy almost to getting things approved, it makes that really difficult. But I think that you can have both, and that's what we try. That's what we're trying to do within Boots at the moment. I think that um, we've adapted the way that our governance works quite significantly since moving from waterfall to more agile ways of working, and some of those changes have been looking at how we. I think what we've done really well is we've tried to identify who's interested in the changes that we're making and what information do they need. So instead of looking at a high level design document that's perhaps 100 pages long and thinking we need to complete that 100-page design document in order for us to have a conversation with enterprise architecture or with other stakeholders, what we've actually done is gone out to those stakeholders and had that conversation and said and asked them, what is it that you need from us? We're trying to deliver these things quicker. So what are you interested in the work that we're doing? And when I had that conversation with people within our enterprise architecture organization, they seemed really interested in what are the business objectives, what's the scope of the change that you're making, how much is it going to cost, and does it meet our architectural strategy as well? Does it meet our strategy? And what are you going to do if it doesn't meet the strategy? So if you get to a point in your design where it doesn't meet that strategy, how are you going to loop back in and make us aware of that? And that was a really useful conversation because then now what we've done is we've adapted our processes such that we can try and identify um, the items that we're likely to deliver in the next major sort of increment or wave coming up, and we can have that conversation with our enterprise architecture about those things that they're interested in. But also, we don't want to do that to too much of a granular level of detail. I think it's about doing the right level of design at the right time, because if you're a few months away from making a change, then you don't need to have a really detailed design at that point. You should be working at a much higher level of detail, getting everyone aligned to that. And once you have a greater degree of confidence that you're actually going to implement that, then that's where you you sort of refine that design and work out that lower level of detail.
I think there's so much truth in what you've said there, and I think that a lot of it comes back to the fact that what we really need to be driving here is conversations. You know, some of these changes we might be making might be uber complicated. There might be difficulties in the architectural landscape and how we're going to implement it. But actually, rather than focusing on writing the document in isolation, if we focus on having the conversation with the right people, that actually eases a lot of the
Yeah.
pain and makes a lot of these changes a lot easier because then you write the right level of documentation to support the conversation.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I think that what one of the one of the senior enterprise architects I used to work with gave this caveman analogy, because we find that a lot of solution architects, myself included, when I was documenting designs, we get to a point in our design where we've just written a 100-page document or something like that. We haven't spoken to anyone, and so then it comes to a point where we need to present that to other people or share it for approval. And that's where we get really nervous, because that's when we realize that we haven't spoken to anyone. And that's where we get really defensive as well, because we don't really want to hear about any change, because it's too late by that point to modify your design. Whereas if you're having those conversations up front, and you've got an understanding of your stakeholders, and those stakeholders could come from any area really. If you understand what they actually need from your design, and what their requirements are, then I think that that's really going to help you. And you can only do that by having conversations. You can't do that in isolation. You can't just guess that.
Absolutely. Um, I think I want to kind of move our conversation on to talk a little bit about some of the tools and technologies that we kind of use that you find kind of pivotal in your role. And I remember probably about 2.5 years ago, one of those light bulb moments that kind of hit that you brought to me was the concept of the C4 model. And I hadn't come across C4 model before. And we started talking about how C4 model could potentially help us at Boots to articulate those designs and really drive those stakeholder conversations that you've just been talking about there. So I want to spend some time just focusing on C4 model and talking about some of the concepts and how useful it's been to you at Boots and also to me in my current organisation now. So let's start with, first of all, what is C4?
So C4 is a framework that we use within Boots. Many other organizations use it. And going back to the point we were making a few minutes ago, the way that I found out about it was by having a conversation with somebody. We had a solution architect who was working in the team, and they told me about C4, and they actually did a C4 presentation. So they were working on a design, and they were presenting to a group of stakeholders. And the way that they did it was really interesting, because they they presented this initial view that set a business context, and that was literally a picture of um, a stick person, with an arrow pointing to a box that represented a website and another box representing a single view of customer system. And so they using that diagram, they were able to describe at a really high level what we were trying to achieve. And so then they switched to a bit more of a logical architecture level of detail. So it was the next level of detail down, and that website box was broken down into services and different UIs and things like that. So um, and I found that quite powerful. Really, it was a really interesting presentation to observe and to be part of. And a couple of other people did say to me after that meeting that Bav, who's the architect that introduced it to me, he presented that really well. So, and I think by listening to that feedback from others and sort of having that same feedback myself, I thought that is something that's quite powerful that I think we could adopt. So I did some research into it along with a couple of colleagues, and ultimately this C4 model is a way of articulating a design in four different levels of detail. So, and I think of it as if I open up Google Maps and I zoom right out, I get a picture of a Google Earth type picture of the globe. And if I zoom into a continent, then I can see all the countries within that continent. And if I zoom in again, I'll see all the cities within a country. And if I zoom in again, I eventually get to Street View. And so the way that I see it, your C1 is almost like your Google Earth view of the world, whereas your C4 is your street view. And between that, you've got two other levels of detail that you can apply. So that's almost like the country and the city levels of detail, back to that analogy. I think that I think that as you progress through the C1 to C2 to C3 to C4, you get to more and more of a granular level of detail, and that really helps, particularly in the agile designs that we do, because within that agile design, as I mentioned earlier, you really don't want to be doing everything up front. You want to be doing things just in time if possible, but you need to have done enough upfront to know that you're heading in the right direction. And so C4 really helps us with that because um, we can do that C1 and C2 level of detail months in advance, and then ready for sprint planning, we can get that C3 level of detail done.
I think the thing for me that I found really powerful was the fact that different people need different levels of detail when you're talking about a system design. And actually, at the very outset of a program or an increment, you don't need to be super detailed. You need to be talking at the highest level of what you're actually trying to achieve. And as you get closer and closer to implementation and actually building something, you need to be able to zoom down and talk about the next level of detail. So, our business stakeholders are probably most interested in that C1 view, what we're trying to create at that holistic level. When we go a level deeper, yeah, we maybe need to start thinking of, well, what microservices do we need to create? Which services are we going to use that's going to kind of make this capability happen? As you zoom down a level below that, you might start to think about, well, what's the class structure going to look
Yeah.
like? And how's that going to actually kind of come together from a coding point of view in each of the individual microservices? And by the time you get to C4, you're literally talking about the code and how you're documenting the code that an engineer might actually be writing. And that's the sort of level of detail you need literally at the point you're going to start the sprint as you go into sprint planning. And I think that's about making sure that you have the right level of detail at the right time in order to give the people the information that they need and the information that they want. And I mean, so personally, I think it's a phenomenal model. If listeners haven't come across it, you can find out more about C4 by looking at c4model.com. Um, and it's something which I think definitely revolutionised the way the Boots works, and something that I've taken forward into my current organisation, and have also evangelised about quite a lot with different people, because I think it really is empowering in terms of what it helped us to achieve. and really helped, I guess, the solution architect to articulate and to tell the story.
Yeah.
I know over many months and years, I've joked with my team um, that solution architects are essentially experts in PowerPoint, but actually that clarity of being able to describe the story and actually say what we're trying to achieve and start the conversation is so important as a solution architect. I mean, for me, that really is the essence of what a solution architect is really about. I don't know if you agree with that,
Yeah,
Amar.
yeah, I completely agree with you, Steve. I think that it is really powerful, and I think that we stumbled across, well, we found it at a time when we were really struggling with notation as well. So I think that classically you've got UML, which has got all these different views. So you've got these beautiful sequence diagrams and these class diagrams and things like that. But we all always really struggled to find an appropriate notation for application architecture. And so each architect within our organization would draw those diagrams very differently. And I think that there are some really great tools out there and great notations out there, but some of them are very difficult to follow. You almost need to do a course before a certification before you can draw a diagram or read a diagram in some of those notations. And so I think that C4, the notation that we've adopted, just feels really intuitive, and we get new architects starting um, every couple of months, for example, and those architects are able to pick this up really really quickly, and I think that is such an important thing for an organization that's growing.
I think that's right. Actually, as new architects kind of come on board and as you bring new people into the organisation, being able to upskill people into your way of working and your way of thinking is so important. And I mean, C4 is a great example of that because it's such an easy framework to adopt and to understand. But how have you found your kind of upskilling architects, and how do you make sure that architects are working with you in the way that you need them to, especially when you've got such a large number of them within the organisation?
I think that it's sometimes it's about ensuring that they've got the right people around them. So as you start in the organization, I think it's about ensuring that they've got the right buddy with them and that they are invited to the right forums and sessions that we have in the calendar to see how other architects do design within the organization, but it's also about having the right level of of assets available to them as well, and the right tools available. So we use Lucidchart at Boots, and we use Confluence as well. And we do have some Confluence templates and even some documents in Confluence as well that talk about our design process. And I liken that to I did this Telgaaf course a few years ago, and during that Telgaaf course, um, the um, the presenter was talking about one of the big uh, energy companies that they'd worked for, and they were saying that they had this guidebook that spoke about what is the architectural process that they've got, and I always thought that was really powerful because when I joined the organization, I don't think there were any sort of uh, or I wasn't aware of documents that was specifically for architects. I think we've got some really good documentation about the processes that we go through, but I didn't know as an architect what kind of tools I should be using. We were using Visio back then, how I should be drawing diagrams or anything like that. So I think to have the some information available, but also to have people there to support and to learn from is really key as well. Because I think if you've got that sense of community, if you've got an understanding of what other people in your role do, that can really help you settle in, I think.
And you mentioned Telgaaf there, and there are obviously a lot of other frameworks that people may have chosen to use, but I guess Telgaaf is probably one of the most popular ones. Do you still think that has a relevance in a modern corporate organisation?
It's a good question. I think that in some organizations, I think it does. I think that um, TOGAF for me gives a really good enterprise architecture framework to work from, and I think that it can help you appreciate from those four domains of architecture, so business, data, application, technology, um, what kind of changes you need to make as an organization. Um, I think that as that feeds into solution architecture, I think that that's where, because I see these agile ways as supporting the software development lifecycle more so than that wider business strategy. I think that at some point the two obviously need to merge, and I haven't seen that merge very well, to be honest with you, in any organization. That sort of that that almost rigid structure that TOGAF gives you for doing more of your business and enterprise architecture versus the more flexible kind of ways that you have to adapt to doing more agile design. So um, I think that they've both got a place in some organizations, but I yeah, although I thought that elements of TOGAF were really good, and um, I like seeing processes like that, and I do think that um, we do need to see more standardization in the way that we do things, particularly within solution architecture. I think that I don't think TOGAF is necessarily the right answer for the organisations that I've worked in. Um, but I do think that it is so important to build out some process and some structure. Um, and I know that with the work that you've done with the BCS, for example, that um, that is something that we're all very keen to ensure improves, because the more standard and more professional we become as in the roles that we're doing, the more we're going to progress as an industry, because IT is still a very young industry, and so some of those frameworks like TOGAF, which which have originated from many years ago, are they still appropriate in modern day organizations that need to be a bit more flexible and adaptable? Perhaps not.
I think there's so much in what you're talking about there, and I think it's for me it's about identifying the frameworks that actually provide value and are useful to you at a particular
Yeah,
time. And if something is providing value and is serving a purpose that people find valuable, absolutely we should continue to use it. But in the spirit of continuous learning, if we see that something isn't working, or maybe we're questioning, well, why do we do things that way? We shouldn't be afraid to change, and we shouldn't be afraid to experiment, because that's the only way we're going to improve as an industry.
yeah, yeah, 100%. I think there is something that you embedded in our mindset, Steve, when you were at Boots, is about that relentless improvement, that continuous improvement. So um, just because you've introduced the C4 model, or just because you're trying to work in a more agile way, doesn't mean that that's the end of it. You need to continue to adapt and find what's right for you as an organization to take you forward over that next period. Just because it's helped solve problems in the last period that you worked through doesn't mean that it's going to do that for the next lot. So you need to keep a really close eye on that. And with the C4 model that we've got at Boots, we had a session with the architects within the digital area a couple of weeks ago, and getting feedback from them to understand what is working within that C4 model and what isn't. And it was great to hear that feedback, because all of them came back and said, you know what, we find our stakeholders really like this. They find it so easy to read a C4 design, but then there was other feedback to say that our um, we're finding that we're writing C 1.5 designs, and so that means to me that if we're sort of uh, doing designs between two defined levels of detail, then we've got our level of abstraction slightly wrong. That's something that we're looking at adjusting now. We know that that's a problem, so we can um, ensure that that C1 and C2 abstraction is pitched at the right level now.
And so much about what we've talked about tonight has involved you developing new skills. You're learning new frameworks, or you're developing new ideas, or new thinking. How do you go about keeping your own skills current?
Um, I don't know, Steve. I mean, I'd like to say that I listen to loads of podcasts and I read loads of articles and attend loads of conferences, but I don't think I do that much of that. But what I think I am good at is listening to others, and I think that I think I'm really lucky to work in an organization where we've got a lot of partners around us and a lot of contractors as well. And although we don't like uh, to sort of see those individuals as having different badges to us, because we are very much so encouraged to treat everyone as part of our team. I do listen to each of them, and when they come in with ideas, um, w- I quite often take that on board because um, I think that's something that I learned really early on in my career when I was developing. I was working really closely with a contractor, and back then I was in an organization that where we kind of looked at contractors. In 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 quite jealous eyes, really. I thought we were really envious of them because we thought that um, they had a better deal than we did. But I took that opportunity to listen to somebody who had worked in many different organizations and seen different ways of working and worked in different technologies, um, and just use them to learn, really. And I think that um, and I'm so glad that I did that back then, and that's something that I've continued doing throughout my career because and now I don't. Well, we wouldn't have adopted the C4 model if it wasn't for somebody telling me that. But also, it's not just contract and partners that I look to get that knowledge from. It's whoever in the organisation, and I don't think that there should be a hierarchy either. I think um, that there are um, engineers within the team who I've learned a hell of a lot from within our DevOps team, for example. So I up until I'd done a course on Azure, I would listen really carefully to the things that people within the DevOps function would be talking about, for example, because if you listen out to the problems that people are presenting, but also listen to the different solutions that they're proposing, even if those solutions aren't appropriate for that moment in time, they can sometimes really help in the future. So sort of listening out, hearing what kind of ideas there are out there, and just keeping them in that memory bank really for later on to tap into. That's I think that's how I pick things up best. I don't think I react so well to. I don't think I learn as well from reading articles and things like that.
I think you're very much like me in a lot of ways, Amar. You actually learn by doing, and by having those
Yeah,
conversations and hearing how other people are approaching problems, you can then apply those things in different
yeah,
contexts. And but I guess different people learn in different ways, and that's why it's good to dig into those conversations. It's great to hear how you learn and how you approach keeping your skills current in order to do the job that you do.
yeah.
Um, Amar, if people are listening, want to get in touch and want to continue the conversation with you, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
I'd say the best way to get in touch is through LinkedIn. So Amar Mehan, Amarmehan. But yeah, I think on that last point, Steve, as well. I think that this podcast is a great place to come and learn. And I've from the episodes that I've listened to over the last couple of months, I've certainly learned a lot. So it's yeah, genuinely, if there are listeners out there who want to understand more about the journey that we've undertaken at Boots from an architecture perspective, or they want to share the things that they've learned in their own organizations, then I'm all ears. Please do get in touch.
And I'm sure people will as well. Amar, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I think we could talk all night about all of the things that the Boots are doing and all of your skills and experience. But thank you so much for sharing, and thank you so much for joining the Engineering Leader today. Amar is one of the most talented technology professionals that I've ever met. I really feel privileged to have had the opportunity to work with him over the last 3 years because I've learned so much from him. He really is the embodiment of continuous improvement, an individual who is always looking to find ways to do things better and striving to learn and to develop new skills. I'm also amazed at how Amar is both able and willing to share his skills with others and to help people learn. If there is one lesson that we can learn from Amar, it is that his approach to working collaboratively produces a significantly better output than any one individual would be able to produce alone. The Engineering Leader is going from strength to strength, and it's all thanks to your efforts sharing the podcast with your network. If you haven't subscribed in your favourite podcast app and on YouTube, please do so now. It really does help more than you know. Also, if everyone listening to the podcast takes the time to tell one other person about the show this week, then next week we can literally double the number of listeners. How cool is that? Please also let me know what you think of the show by reaching out to me on LinkedIn. Just search Steve Westgarth, and also find @SteveWestgarth on Twitter. In the meantime, remember, we all write bad code. If you disagree, you may as well switch off. My name is Steve Westgarth, and this is the Engineering Leader.